where you perform the bulk of the actions that you're going to do during your turn. Here are some of the possible actions you can take during this phase. You can perform a normal summon or set of a monster. This includes tribute summons and tribute sets. You can change the battle position of a monster, which includes flip summoning monsters. You'll also be able to activate spell cards, trap cards, or effects, or you can set spells and trap cards. Let's look at this in more detail with the Fast Effects timing chart that was referenced in the previous video. According to the Fast Effects timing chart, every phase and step in a duel begins in the open game state, where you can take 3 different actions. Actions that do not start a chain, actions that do start a chain, or choosing to pass play to the opponent, which usually leads to the next phase of play. These are the actions that you can perform that do not start a chain and can only be done during the open game state. You can perform a normal summon, set, or tribute summon or tribute set. You can perform a game mechanic special summon that does not start a chain, such as a link summon, an Xyz summon, a synchro summon, or the special summon of an effect monster whose ability to summon itself is not an activated effect. You can identify these because they say where they can be summoned from in their card text in parentheses. If you already had your pendulum scale, you can perform your turn's 1 pendulum summon. You can set a spell or trap card face down into one of your open spell and trap card zones. This action also does not start a chain. Or you can take a monster that you have on the field. If it were face down in defense position, you can then flip it to face up attack position, which would be a flip summon. You can take a monster that you have that's already in face up attack position and shift it to face up defense position, which is a battle position change of a monster from attack position to defense position. Or you can take a monster that's already in face up defense position and shift it to face up attack position. Every monster can change its battle position once per turn, with the exception of the turn that the monster was summoned to the field, set to the field, or had already declared a battle this turn. Once a player chooses to take an action that does not start a chain, one of 4 things will happen. The trigger condition for a card's activation may have been met. If not, the turn player may want to activate a fast effect. If neither of those things have happened, the opposing player might have a fast effect that they would like to activate. In any of these 3 scenarios, we then proceed to chain rules, where the player who didn't activate the most recent effect can respond. We build a chain and resolve the chain. Once the chain has been resolved, we return to the yellow box and go through the sequence over and over again, creating a sequence of chains using only fast effects. Once both players have chosen not to activate any fast effects, we proceed back to the open game state, where the turn player has the freedom to make a choice to perform an action that either does not start a chain, starts a chain, or pass priority to their opponent. Assuming you'd like to take an action that does start a chain, which would be to flip a face down spell or trap card face up, assuming it is a quick play spell or a trap card, it must have been set for at least 1 turn before doing so. You can activate a spell card from your hand to the field, whether it's a normal spell or an equipment spell, a continuous spell or a field spell, into an open spell or trap card zone. Or if you have any quick effects you can activate, whether it be trap cards that can be activated from your hand, such as Infinite Impermanence, a quick play spell card from your hand, such as Forbidden Droplet, or a monster with a quick effect, such as Wandering Griffin Rider. We'll have started a chain, so we proceed immediately to chain rules. Once chain rules are resolved, we'll return to the yellow box, allowing the turn player to perform the first action, and so on and so forth, just like we mentioned before, until we return to the open game state. We can then continue to make actions that either do start a chain or do not start a chain, as long as we give our opponent and ourselves the opportunity to respond afterwards before returning to the open game state, until we eventually decide that we'd like to proceed to the next phase. This is our third option. We pass priority to our opponent. Our opponent is then given one last opportunity to activate any fast effects if they'd like to. We proceed again to chain rules, and then return to the open game state, where we can pass priority again. If our opponent decides that they would not like to activate a fast effect, we then get to confirm whether or not we would both like to proceed to the next phase of play. Following the main phase, that could either be the battle phase or the end phase. You do not have to tell your opponent which phase you would like to enter from the main phase, just that they'd like to agree to leave the main phase. If both players do not agree to leave the main phase, you proceed back to the open game state. If both players do agree to leave the main phase, you proceed to the start of the next phase that you'd like to proceed to. Following main phase 1, you are able to enter either the battle phase or the end phase. You can only enter the main phase 2 if you've chosen to enter the battle phase, which you cannot do on the first turn of the duel, which you do have the option to do on every subsequent turn of the duel. We will spend an entire video on the battle phase in the next video, but for now we're going to talk about main phase 2 and the end phase. The main phase 2 is just the follow-up to main phase 1. Any actions that you're allowed to use during your main phase that you may not have already done, you are now allowed to do in main phase 2, such as perform your 1 normal summon or set per turn, your 1 pendulum summon per turn, or perform any battle position changes you may, or perform any battle position changes that you would like to do following the battle phase. If you already performed your normal summon or set, your pendulum summon, or have already declared a battle or already changed the monster's battle position, you cannot do those again, but you can do them if you have not already done them. All of the same rules and the types of cards or effects you're allowed to activate are exactly the same in Main Phase 2 as they are in Main Phase 1, following the same fast effects timing chart. Following your Main Phase 1, if you'd like to proceed straight to the end phase, it's the same thing as if you went to your Main Phase 2 and then proceeded to your end phase. The end phase is a phase that occurs about when you're ready to end your turn. Things that can take place during the end phase are resolving cards or effects that say to perform an action during your end phase. You can activate quick play spells and trap cards in the end phase, similar to how you could during the standby phase and the draw phase. And the last thing that takes place during the end phase is what we call discard for hand size limit. You're not allowed to end your turn with more than 6 cards in your hand. If you have more than 6 cards in your hand, you must discard cards from your hand to the graveyard until you have 6 cards in your hand during your end phase. This would happen after both players have passed priority, both players have chosen not to activate any fast effects, and both players have agreed to move to the next phase, which would be your opponent's next turn. So at this point in time, you would then discard any additional card you have in your hand to the graveyard until you have 6 cards. In the next video, we'll be learning about the battle phase.